Welcome back to another episode of the Casey Campbell podcast. Casey Campbell with you, of course. Pleased to be joined by Josh Pierson of HMD Motorsports. Of course, he'll be driving for them in Indy Lights in 2023. Josh, welcome back to the road to Indy.
Thank you. Yeah, obviously it's been a while since I've been back in a single seater, so it should be an interesting year. But obviously pleased to be back on the road to Indy and back on the path to IndyCar.
So let's we talked to you last year as you were getting ready to do some IMSA stuff and go the sports car route.
Hmm?
Well, what made you decide like maybe I want to try this again?
I think the sports car route for me wasn't like a permanent thing. For me it was really about finding a way to improve, and I felt that sports cars was a way to improve at a much faster rate, right? There's so many different variables in sports car racing and drive time that really influence the ability to learn. And I think that, having to deal with traffic and tire management and fuel saving and doing pit stops is all valuable things that, I don't think I would have gotten if I had gone to Indy Pro from USF. And really it all started with the WEC offer. I think when I got the WEC offer, it was kind of a no-brainer which one to choose. I have this offer to go drive in the World Endurance Championship, and then I have, an offer to do Indy Pro 2000. And for me, I think, it was clear which choice to make. And I felt that I was going to improve and learn the most going to sports cars. And I think that, that is the case. I've definitely learned a lot. And, I've done things that I don't think most drivers will do, but when they go to IndyCar, I've done pit stops, I've done driver changes, I've had to fuel save, I've had to manage tires. And it's a lot of stuff that, I think you'll end up using in IndyCar, but in Indy Lights and these junior formulas, you're not really going to have to use. So there's a lot of valuable experience there. And I think in general, I just learned a lot in the sports car route. And, I'm doing WEC again, obviously this year alongside Indy Lights. So I'll miss 3 of the Indy Lights races, but I think that the learning that I get from WEC is invaluable.
So you just, I don't know if this was new. I guess I didn't catch this, but was that out there? Did you just announce something?
No, so the WEC announcement for this year actually was in June. It was during Le Mans.
Okay.
As one was announced for next year as well. So that's been out for a while. Yeah.
All right. I just maybe have not paid it. I was all this different motorsports as well. But yeah, you're going to be doing on top of a lot of the fun stuff within the sports car world as well with IMSA. So what's that going to be like? Because now with how the format is, and now with the GTP and everything there, you're traveling all around the world now. You can compete in Daytona, you can compete in Le Mans, and in really anywhere.
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting. Obviously, I'm still going to be doing LMP2 on the sports car side. So I'm not in one of the manufacturer categories, but I think that, for sure this is going to be a huge step for sports cars. I think that in general, WEC and IMSA coordinating is a huge deal. I think when I think back to the past, they've kind of, at one point they were kind of a joint series where you could go back and forth and run both. And we had huge fields. And I think that it kind of fell off when they started doing their own thing. So I'm pleased to see that they're working together and coordinating, although they didn't coordinate the schedules this year. A lot of the IMSA guys have some conflicts. So we've had to deal with that in Tom Blomqvist, who signed with us and was announced not that long ago, is replacing Alex, who's going to the Cadillac program on the WEC side. But we have to find a replacement for Tom because WEC has some races that overlap with some of the IMSA events. So I think in general, they've done a good job of coordinating. I think, it could be a little bit better, but I'm excited to see what this brings. I think there's going to be a lot of manufacturers coming in. And I think we're going to see huge fields in the prototype class, which will be a breath of fresh air.
So you're going to be doing Indy Lights and the sports car stuff as well. What's that going to be like and trying to manage everything?
I think on the IMSA side, I'm not currently signed for IMSA. I'm hoping to have a seat for the 4 long races and for the Endurance Cup. But the nice thing about IMSA is with the Endurance Cup, one race is at the beginning of the year and the other's at the end of the year. So it doesn't add too much chaos to the mix, and it would just be more for the experience. And it would be, I think, obviously a really good thing for me to do. On the WEC side, I think going back and forth between the lights car and the sports car is a big adjustment. Obviously, the P2 car has carbon brakes. It's a lot heavier. It's a closed cockpit car with fenders. It's got a lot of differences that set it apart from the single seater like the lights car. And after testing the lights car at the Chris Griffiths test and then at Barber this past weekend, it's definitely there is an adjustment that has to be made. But that's kind of why I'm doing it. I think that it's good to kind of push myself and to be in a position where I have multiple driving styles I need to adapt to. And in general, I think the lights car can only really help me in every other car. The Cooper tire is such an unforgiving tire. And I know we're going to Firestone, so that's all going to change. But doing the testing on the Coopers, it's a very unforgiving car. It's always moving around. It's very unstable. It's unpredictable in a way. And when you compare that to the P2 car, where the P2 car is always stable, like when we have a small snap in the P2 car, it's a really big moment. And in the lights car, that small snap is happening every corner. So it's little differences like that really set the two apart. And I think that, being able to adapt throughout the year is going to be really what sets me apart. But I think that, it's going to be more of a struggle coming from the WEC races to the lights races and from the lights races to the WEC races. I think that the lights car is only going to help me in the P2 car. And if I learn to adapt, which I'm sure I will, and learn to go back and forth, I don't think it'll be an issue.
Yeah, so of course, yeah. And so you did mention earlier, you're going to miss 3 lights races. Do you know what those are?
I believe they are Barber, Detroit, and Laguna.
Oh, interesting. Going into this weekend, actually, no, not this weekend. Just going into the season, really just kind of doing both cars. How old are you, by the way? Aren't you like 17, 18 years old?
I'm 16.
You're 16 years old, and just kind of, obviously a lot of people your age, doing, being in Indy Lights is one thing. Also racing around the world is a completely different thing. What's that like to manage for someone that's just getting his driver's license? Do you even have your driver's license?
Yes, so I've had my driver's license for a while now. I got that as soon as I turned 16 on my birthday. So
okay.
That was a while ago. That was back in February. But I think in terms of managing it, I've kind of gotten used to it after this year with all the WEC and IMSA back and forth between, Europe and Asia and then back to the States. I've definitely gotten used to all the worldwide travel. The nice thing is that, traveling around the world and going to Europe and Asia, it makes the American races and the American travel seem relatively short. So when I have to go from, Portland to Florida, it's not really a big deal compared to Portland to Bahrain or Abu Dhabi. So I think in general, you kind of get used to managing it. And, my school is all online. So for me, it's not an issue when it comes to schoolwork. So I think I have more freedom than your average 16-year-old. But I think in general, it's not difficult for me to manage. I've gotten pretty used to it. I think adding in lights will be maybe a bit of a struggle at first, but since, with IMSA and WEC, only doing the 4 long races kind of frees up the schedule. So I don't think it'll be too different to this past year when I did the full IMSA season and the full WEC season. But it should be an interesting year. And I think that, in general, I've learned to kind of manage the travel.
Okay. Let's talk about, since you have traveled far, I'm pretty sure you have some big travel stories. So you can go in, where's the longest that you've traveled?
Definitely Abu Dhabi. I think anywhere in the Middle East is a pretty rough travel day, because it ends up being more like 2 days of travel. That's a pretty difficult time change. It's from me back home to Abu Dhabi was the full, you have the full cycle. So if it was 8 here, it would 8 a.m. here, it would be 8 p.m. there. Yeah. That was definitely, I think, probably the most difficult one. And that was, I don't know, a 12-hour travel day, or definitely longer than that, actually, because we had to go from Portland to New York and then from New York to Abu Dhabi. So I think it was like a 10-hour flight from New York, and then it's like a 7-hour flight from Portland to New York. So, roughly 17 hours of travel. It's pretty rough, especially with the time change. That was definitely the longest one. I think Bahrain will probably be similar. So definitely, a ways out there. Ironically, I think the easiest event for me to attend on the WEC calendar this year is actually Japan. Florida, obviously, being the one that was closest with Sebring. But Japan it's like, if we could go straight from Portland to Japan, it would be maybe a 9-hour flight. But it ended up being like a 10, 11-hour travel day, which in hindsight is not a lot for a lot of the European races. Most of them are 12, 13, 14-hour travel days. So Japan was actually probably one of the closer events for me.
Yeah. Okay, so we talked about traveling flights and how it can be a nightmare. How does someone handle being in the air for that long?
Well, I think you get used to it. To be honest, it's kind of difficult to explain. Like, I've been traveling my whole life. Since I was 7, I've been traveling nationally around the US. And then when I was 11, I started doing international travel for the World Finals of karting. So I've been traveling, my whole life around the world. And I think that you kind of get used to the travel and getting used to, switching time zones when you land. But in terms of being on a plane for that long, you just have ways to deal with it, especially now with all the media that is out there. There's tons of movies to watch, tons of shows. So I think in general, it's not too difficult. I just sleep the whole time usually.
Yeah.
My way of dealing with it. If you can sleep on a plane, I think that's just the best way. I just fall asleep.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, people can sleep on plane. How long can you sleep on a plane for?
The entire flight.
You can sleep on the plane for an entire flight.
Yes, I did. From New York to Austria, it was, I think, an 8-hour flight, and I slept 6 hours of it, or 7 hours of it. So I can basically sleep the whole flight, which is usually my way of dealing with it. And if I don't sleep the whole flight, I'll just watch a movie, usually Ford versus Ferrari or something, just anything to kind of just pass the time.
Yeah. Is there like more movies you watch, or does it have to be Ford versus Ferrari?
I mean, a lot of it is just racing documentaries and movies, really. I feel like I'm a very uninteresting person when it comes to the motorsports. My whole life revolves around motor racing. I think the Audi films Truth in 24, I watched quite a few times, and I absolutely loved those documentaries. And then Ford versus Ferrari is my favorite movie. So anything to do with motorsports, I'm always a huge fan of.
We got to get you into some sci-fi shows. Yeah, we'll work on that. I don't know. What's a genre of show that you want to get into? I might as well continue on this path. What's a genre of show you want to get into if you can?
See, the thing is I don't want to get into another genre, because for me, motorsports so I really enjoy just watching motor racing and being around it.
Yeah.
So I don't really have like a specific genre that I'd want to get into. I think for me, it's just, I want to be surrounded by racing. And if I could watch IndyCar on the plane, or Formula One, I would.
I've watched NASCAR on the plane before, so
it's coming around. Yeah.
It's coming. So yeah, for sure. So okay, so tell more about your schedule. Like where are we going to see? And obviously you're going to be, doing the WEC stuff and the IMSA stuff and obviously all the light stuff. What WEC races are you going to be in?
So I'll be at all the WEC races. I do the full season there as the silver. And then if I'm doing the IMSA season, I'll just do the 4 long races, the Endurance Cup. But I believe they added a 7th race this year for WEC. So this year it was 6, and this going into this next year is gonna be 7. It'll start out in Sebring again, and I think from there we go to Spa and then Portugal. After Portugal, we have Monza or Le Mans. I don't know. I think Le Mans and then Monza. Yeah. From Monza, we'll go to Japan and then Bahrain again. So it's pretty much the same schedule. They just added in Portugal, which luckily for me, I've driven there before. I did a test session with United. So I know the track. It's a very beautiful circuit, a very flowing circuit, lots of elevation in Portugal. So that'll be an interesting race to deal with. And I think that is actually one of the races that we have a conflict with the IMSA drivers, in this case, Tom. So I think it should be interesting going into WEC with 7 events. I'm definitely looking forward to it. I think that WEC is kind of needing the bigger calendar. The 6 races is a lot when it comes to travel. But WEC is, for me, I'm not going to complain about more experience. The 7th race is just more experience. It's more time in the car. And it's more time in a race scenario that, I don't think a lot of the lights drivers are going to have. So definitely I'm happy with going in with 7 races and excited to see what the season brings.
Yeah, for sure. Should be okay. Most interesting country you've been to?
Japan, definitely. I think, I actually got this question not that long ago. And going around to all these countries and experiencing all the different cultures, I think Japan is the most unique.
Yeah.
Definitely the most civilized and the most polite. I don't think I've been anywhere where I've been bowed to so much. Just very, in general, polite people and a very advanced culture, very advanced people. Yeah. I think there was something quite special about Tokyo as well. I spent a couple of days in Tokyo after the race. Yeah. We always try and spend, my dad and I always try and spend a couple of days in these countries just to experience it and to kind of get a feel for, what it's like to experience another culture. And I think Japan is definitely the most interesting, spending time there and talking with people from the country. They might not speak very good English, but they're always trying to help you, in any way they can. Just very helpful people. Tokyo in itself is a very interesting city. It's very quiet. I think most people, when you go there, if you come from an American city like New York, or Chicago or Portland, all these American cities, lots of honking, construction noises, and just the general flow of a city. There's lots of talking. It's very loud. It's noisy. Tokyo was extremely quiet. There's no construction noise. No one honks. No one talks. It's just very quiet. It's almost like when it's just snowed. That's kind of the analogy. It feels like it's just snowed there all the time. And people are exceptionally nice. And in general, just a very polite culture. It was definitely an eye-opener for me. And I think that was definitely the most unique country I've been to.
For sure. That should be fun. So you balanced the IMSA and the WEC season last year. Now you're going to be doing both Indy Lights and WEC, 2 different styles of cars. How are you going to get used to really all that?
I think in general, as a driver, that's part of my job is to adapt, going back and forth between different cars. Ollie and Alex, they had to do it this year coming from DPI and then into the LMP2 car, which granted is a lot more similar than, a single seater to a sports car. But it still had its differences in the fact that the DPI car was faster, had more downforce. So I think that, it's kind of part of our job is to be able to adapt and to be able to drive multiple types of machinery. And that's kind of been one of my goals. I always strive to be, able to do every discipline. As a racing driver, I want to excel at each discipline. I had my hand in at some dirt racing after karting. I drove mini sprints, and then obviously formula cars, sports cars. So I've had my hand in and my foot in the door of kind of all these disciplines. And I think that in general, I want that to be something that kind of sets me apart from other drivers, is that I'm able to adapt and able to get in whatever car I'm needed in. And so I think that it'll be a good challenge. Obviously the Lights car, as I've said previously, I believe is only going to help me in the P2 car, because the kind of frantic style that it has right now is it helps you get more comfortable in a car that moves around a lot, and the P2 car doesn't move around at all. So it'll make the P2 car feel even more comfortable, which for me means that I'm just going to be able to be more confident in the car. And then I think, with the Firestones coming, I'm curious to see what that does to the car. I would assume that it's going to settle down the car a little bit, and it'll be more like a proper race tire. The Cooper was a good race tire, but it definitely has a lot of movement to it. Whereas the Firestone, I think, is going to have a bit of a softer sidewall, and the car is not going to move around as much. So I think it'll be interesting to see what happens with that tire, and it might make the transition a little bit easier.
For sure. Yeah, it's definitely going to be interesting to see how you manage both series. But I mean, you've been in sports cars and you're only just 16 years old. So it'll be, obviously you've been really impressive in a lot of these things. So, well, it'll be interesting to see what challenges this year will bring with you. Yeah, should be fun. Josh Pierson, thank you so much for coming on and talking with us. And good luck this year in Indy Lights. Good luck in WEC, and we're going to have you on again throughout the year if that's okay with you.
Yeah, of course. Thank you very much for having me.